Hey guys, Joel Haber here. I just finished a big long week of animating, so I missed an upload on this channel. It was just a long week. I'm tired, didn't get much sleep, but I hope I could formulate some thoughts for you today. I just wanted to get a video out there. And today I want to talk about a couple of different things. Firstly, Kiarostami's Koker Trilogy. Kiarostami is an Iranian filmmaker, and he made a lot of really beautiful, great, sometimes very grounded, sometimes more meta films. And the Koker Trilogy starts with Where Is My Friend's House? And that's a very kind of naturalistic film about a boy looking to return his classmates' homework before school the next day in this little village in Iran. And then what's interesting about the trilogy is the following two films, which I think are Life and Nothing More and Through the Olive Trees. I've seen a couple of different translations, so I'm not sure exactly what the second one's called, but I think it's Life and Nothing More. Each subsequent film becomes about the making of, or a meta look at, the previous film. So the second film is a person playing Kiarostami going back to this village after a natural disaster that happened there, and he's looking for the boy who starred in the movie. And he's just sort of aimlessly talking to people, trying to find this boy. And the film after that is a somewhat fictionalized telling of a romance between two extras from the previous movie that kind of bloomed while he was making this movie. And there's a really beautiful dynamic between each subsequent film that feels almost like an apology. In the first one, it feels like he's going back to this village and realizing he almost just used them and left them and went and lived his director life. And they went through this huge disaster, and he realized he wasn't even a part of that. And he's going back to kind of make amends and just get back in touch with these people that he left after he finished the movie. And then the following film seems to be an acknowledgement of even the arrogance of that, and how there could still be these beautiful stories going on beneath the surface that he's totally missing in his own quest to feel better about himself. So he tells this somewhat, I don't know if it's fictionalized, I don't know how fictionalized it is, but he tells this love story between two of the actors he had in the movie. And it's just a really beautiful thing that could only happen through growth. And I think growth and self-reflection, and I think that's what really worked and didn't work about the rehearsal. And that was a very long-winded intro to say I watched the rehearsal. I was a huge fan of Nathan For You. I think it's a really well-constructed, funny show. Most I ever laughed at a show. But the finale, Finding Francis, I think is such a beautiful meta look at deconstructing what he was even doing, who is this character he was playing, and this joke one-off character of a Bill Gates impersonator becomes sort of the focus of a very real story about his life and his regrets. And when I saw Finding Francis, I knew the day I saw it, I'm okay, this is the finale of the series, because you can't go back to punking small businesses when you've deconstructed to that level. So I was always curious what he was going to do next. I felt like it had to be something a little more outwardly positive, something a little more along the lines of helping people. And I guess the rehearsal is getting at that. It starts from this place of wanting to help people prepare for their lives while not losing the awkward comedy and over-the-top plans and stuff that made Nathan For You so enjoyable. But then I'm going to go full spoilers here. I'm just going to talk loosely. I don't want to stop myself from saying anything, but I recommend you watch it, and it'd still be enjoyable to watch even if you watch this first, I'm sure. But it kind of gets, it has this structure, but I think it got messed up by COVID. The first episode was just about helping this guy, but then it becomes very focused on just Angela and this house and raising a fake kid together. And it's a little more in the gray area than even Nathan For You, I feel like. Because Nathan For You, I think there's a level where you could always write off him being kind of scummy and him being like putting people in these tough situations. Because firstly, he always looked like the bad guy. And secondly, the people were doing it, to help their business. In some level, they were doing it out of greed or a want to be on TV or this or that. But then once you start meddling in people's actual lives, it becomes a little sadder. It becomes these people just want to figure out their lives. They just want to, and obviously there's still that pull of like, oh, a TV show or this or that or anything. But it feels like there's less for them to gain from this. Like at least in Nathan For You, I always kind of took comfort that I'm like, these businesses probably got some boost from Nathan, but like the end of Dumb Starbucks where he puts the sign up for the Elios Cafe. Like it feels like, okay, at least there's always something for the business to get out of this crazy scheme. And I just didn't find that in the rehearsal right away. Because, Angela does seem kind of like the butt of the joke. It's like, well, she's going through this thing, but she's not that interesting of like a subject for a TV show. And it seems like she was almost being made out to be hateable because she's religious and she has some crazy conspiratorial beliefs and this and that. And it wasn't that interesting to me to be like, okay, like, am I laughing with her or at her? And I think the show was almost a little too gung-ho to deconstruct itself. Like Nathan For You took probably until season 3 or 4 that it really started like getting meta, and then the finale really hammered it home. But this show was like from the start like trying to deconstruct itself, and it was like it felt like it was trying to be 20 steps ahead of itself sometimes to its detriment. I think it works in some regards and it doesn't in others, but the finale kind of brought it home to a really beautiful point. And I think that's why I brought up Kiarostami's trilogy. It's only through these real life realizations and growth. Like if you wrote a whole script out, you're not gonna learn something and change it by the end. You're usually just gonna shoot the script. But when you're at the whim of real life and real things are affecting your film and real things are affecting your art, you are forced to adapt and grow. And I think it puts a lot of onus on the artist to do the right thing in their art. And you could watch an artist do the wrong thing, and that's like interesting in a different way, but it's morally harder to watch. And I think the finale was a really nice microcosm of him realizing maybe the show had flaws or was flawed from the get-go. And that happens when this kid, Remy, he has a child actor who he was pretending to be his dad, but the child actor grew attached and really wanted him to be his real dad. And the finale kind of squarely focuses on like trying to help this kid realize it wasn't real. And it comes around to a really beautiful point where he is very Synecdoche, New York, like to the beat. Like the show already with the reconstructions and stagings was very much Synecdoche, New York, but then when he like takes on the role of the mom of the kid and kind of plays out the whole series from her perspective, you're like, that's total Synecdoche, New York. But it's just so beautiful and so simple. You always hear walk a mile in someone else's shoes or walk a mile in their shoes when you're trying to forgive somebody or forgive yourself. And I just think it was such a beautiful, simple way to like forgive both himself and the mom and the kid, and like I just think forgiveness is just one of the most powerful forces. And with that said, let me gather my thoughts. I think the thing that will make or break the finale is where he goes in season 2. I don't think the lesson can only be, okay, I shouldn't use child actors anymore. I think that's almost too narrow And if all he learned from this season was don't use child actors, but then he goes on to continue to use and manipulate people, it'll feel a little cheapened. And it really makes me curious what the next season will be, because it feels so bookended. Because, you know, it's a show called The Rehearsal, and at the end he's reenacting. You know, it's a total flip. Rather than preparing beforehand, he's looking back afterhand. And I just don't know like where to go from there. He's smart. I wouldn't even say he knows what he's doing. I think he just has good ideas and he runs with them. And I think he openly acknowledges that sometimes he doesn't know what he's doing. But I trust him to do something interesting. But I hope he doesn't like fall back on the promise of like the forgiveness angle and the guilt and forgiving himself. And because I felt like he was forgiving himself for the whole show. You know, like the final talk with Angela, she was really humanized, you know, for the first time in the show, arguably. She was just like, she quoted the Bible still, which I'm sure people who aren't religious would roll their eyes at, but like at the end of the day, it was a really beautiful, apt quote. And the last thing I want to bring up is The Last of Us Part 2, which I think takes that onus of forgiveness and puts it on the player of the game. And this is all over the place. I'm sorry, but The Last of Us Part 2 was one of the most impactful like pieces of media I've interacted with in a long time. And because without giving away too much, you play through the game and then you have this villain, and then you see the whole thing again from the villain's perspective, and it really makes you like wrestle with like forgiveness directly. And I think Nathan was imploring the audience to do the same, and I think The Last of Us Part 2 does it in such a direct way that it's almost like video games are, when used well, are like such a great medium for empathy. And I know this is a movie channel, but I think movies implore empathy out of us from a distance, and sometimes it's really hard to gauge when we are truly being asked to be empathetic, because we're always viewing things in a very manipulated, distanced way. But in The Last of Us Part 2, the story is very catered still, but you are a player. You are taking out the actions yourself, and I think the interactivity is interesting because it makes it a sort of a game where you do have to interrogate your inner feelings. And a lot of people came away from that game still hating the villain, and I'd argue that maybe they failed the experiment of empathy that the game was asking of them. But I feel like Nathan himself went through a similar game of empathy with his show, where he took on the role of somebody other than himself to kind of reassess his actions and reassess what he could have done differently, and ultimately, rather than try to change and manipulate things, he accepted things as they happened. And I guess that's the point. You really need to know where the show goes to place your finger on how thematically resonant it'll be, because it's one thing to learn the lesson, it's another thing to put it into practice. And I think The Last of Us Part 2 ends on a note of forgiveness and acceptance and moving on. And I feel like if he's continuing the show, he's not forgiving and he's not accepting and moving on unless he truly alters the show in some unrecognizable way. And I don't know, I'm so tired. I'm sorry if this is all nonsense. Ultimately, I wanted to talk about art and forgiveness, and I think the ties between the three things I talked about are loose, but they're all interesting to consider. And I think you could probably write a more like proper essay and actually draw the parallels better than I did in this conversation. But I hope it makes sense a little bit. I really love Nathan Fielder. I think he's doing a lot of interesting things. It's like something that At one point in time, I was more interested in reality and hybrid stuff. And at this point, I'm more interested in it only if it's in a very honest, empathetic capacity for my own work. But I'm still interested to see what he does next. And I don't know how long this was. I hope you guys are having a nice day. I'll try to upload some more stuff on here moving forward. I like just sitting down and talking, even if it doesn't always amount to much. And yeah, I hope you guys have a nice day. I love movies. Love you guys. Bye bye.